I'm Miranda Hayes, 32 years old, and secretly the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. My status-obsessed family has no idea. They think I'm struggling because I don't flaunt designer labels or drive luxury cars. Tonight is my father's 60th birthday celebration, an extravagant affair where appearances matter above all else. I decided to dress simply one last time, a final test of their values before revealing my success. What happened next changed everything. Before I tell you what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been judged for your appearance, hit subscribe and join me for this journey of sweet justice. Growing up, we weren't always wealthy. My childhood home was a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland. My father, Lawrence Hayes, worked 60-hour weeks at his small manufacturing company, trying to make it successful. My mother, Diana, stayed home with my sister Heather and me, stretching every dollar. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich. Back then, my father valued hard work and family time. Sunday dinners were sacred, and he taught us that character mattered more than possessions. Everything changed when I was 15. Dad's company landed a major contract, and suddenly money was flowing in. Within months, we moved to an expansive house in an exclusive neighborhood. The transformation in my family was swift and jarring. Dad replaced his trusty Ford with a Mercedes. Mom began hosting lavish dinner parties instead of cozy family meals. But no one changed more dramatically than my sister Heather. Heather, 2 years older than me, embraced our new status with disturbing enthusiasm. She discarded her old friends for the popular crowd, traded her modest wardrobe for designer everything, and became obsessed with appearances. It's not just about having money, she would lecture me. It's about showing it. My mother never challenged this new value system. Instead, she became its quiet enabler, rewarding Heather's social climbing with shopping sprees and praise. Mom would gently suggest I put more effort into my appearance and make connections with the right people. Their definition of right people always seemed to revolve around wealth and status. While my family was busy reinventing themselves, I felt increasingly alienated. The values I'd been raised with had vanished overnight, replaced by an obsession with image and status. When I turned 18 and left for college, it was almost a relief. I chose to study computer science at a state university rather than the prestigious private school my parents preferred. "You're throwing away opportunities," my father said, disappointed. What he didn't understand was that I was following my passion. Computers made sense to me in a way people often didn't. Code didn't judge you based on your clothes or who your friends were. It simply worked or it didn't. College wasn't easy. I worked multiple jobs while maintaining a full course load. There were nights I survived on vending machine snacks, coding until sunrise in the computer lab. My family interpreted my exhaustion during weekend visits as evidence I was struggling. They never knew I was building my first software application between classes and shifts at the campus coffee shop. During my junior year, I developed a neural interface algorithm that caught the attention of several professors. With their encouragement, I entered a national innovation competition and won. The prize money became the seed funding for what would eventually become NeuroSync Technologies. Starting the company from my apartment's spare bedroom wasn't glamorous. I ate ramen noodles for weeks straight to afford server space. When my family called, I kept conversations brief, not wanting to explain that I couldn't visit because every spare dollar went back into the business. "Still wearing those same old jeans?" my sister would tease during video calls. "You know they make new clothes every season, right?" What my family didn't see was how steadily NeuroSync was growing. Our neural interface technology was revolutionary, allowing for unprecedented human-computer interaction. 5 years after founding the company from that tiny spare bedroom, we had over 300 employees and a valuation exceeding $2 billion. Throughout this journey, I made a deliberate choice to keep my success hidden from my family. It wasn't about planning some dramatic reveal. Initially, I simply didn't want to share news they might dismiss or diminish. Later, as success mounted, I became curious. Would they ever value me for who I was, not what I possessed? Their constant judgment of my ordinary lifestyle became an unintentional test of character that they consistently failed. The ultimate irony came 6 months ago when my father's company began struggling. Market changes and mismanagement had left him vulnerable. I learned through industry channels that he was desperately seeking investors. After careful consideration and consultation with my board, NeuroSync acquired his company through a shell corporation. The terms were fair, better than he would have received elsewhere. And just like that, I became my father's boss without him knowing. Every Sunday, I still attended family dinner at my parents' mansion. These meals had become predictable performances. My father would boast about business connections. My mother would showcase her latest luxury purchases. Heather would arrive in a new designer outfit, usually with an equally well-dressed boyfriend in tow. And all of them would find subtle ways to comment on my simple clothing and practical car. "Miranda, darling, don't you think it's time for a professional makeover?" Mom would suggest, eyeing my minimal makeup and naturally wavy hair. "Still driving that Japanese economy car? I know a dealer who could get you something more impressive," Dad would offer with a concerned expression. "God, Miranda, that sweater is so practical," Heather would say, somehow making the word sound like an insult. I absorbed these comments weekly, watching as they judged not just me but everyone around them through the narrow lens of wealth display. When my father mentioned his upcoming 60th birthday celebration, describing it as the networking event of the season, I knew it would be the perfect opportunity to finally end this charade. The invitation arrived on heavy cardstock with gold embossing. "Join us for an evening of elegance celebrating Lawrence Hayes' 60th birthday." The dress code read formal attire, excellence expected. My sister texted separately, "Please wear something appropriate for once. Dad's inviting everyone who matters." As I placed the invitation on my desk in my corner office overlooking the Seattle skyline, I made my decision. I would attend the party, but I wouldn't play dress up. After years of judgment, it was time for my family to see me for who I really was, successful or not, designer clothes or not. The morning of my father's birthday party dawned clear and bright. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown penthouse, illuminating the space that perfectly reflected my personal aesthetic: clean lines, thoughtfully selected art, comfortable yet elegant furniture. Nothing flashy or ostentatious like my parents' gold-trimmed, marble-filled mansion, but every piece was quality, chosen with care rather than for show. I sipped my coffee on the balcony, watching the city come alive below. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could afford to buy and sell most of the guests who would be attending tonight's party, yet in my family's eyes, I was the unsuccessful one. The family disappointment who just couldn't get it together. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie, my best friend since college, and now NeuroSync COO. "Today's the day. Ready for the big reveal," her message read. I typed back, "As ready as I'll ever be." My phone immediately rang. Stephanie never was one for lengthy text conversations. "I still think you should just show up in your power suit with a company car and get it over with," she said without preamble. "This game has gone on long enough." "It's not a game," I replied, though I understood her frustration. "It's about principle. I want them to accept me for who I am, not what I have." "Miranda," Stephanie said gently, "they've been judging you for years. Remember last year's birthday dinner?" The memory surfaced immediately. Heather examining my simple black dress with a critical eye, loudly proclaiming to everyone at the restaurant, "You should dress like success, not like stress, Miranda. No wonder you're still single." "I remember," I said quietly. "And you're still giving them chances," Stephanie pointed out. "That's either very forgiving or slightly masochistic." "Maybe both," I admitted with a small laugh. "But tonight's different. After the acquisition is fully announced next week, they'll know everything anyway. I just want one last chance for them to see me without the CEO title coloring their perception." Stephanie sighed.
"Fine.
"But I'll have my phone ready for your rescue call. And Miranda? They're the ones who should be seeking your approval, not the other way around." After hanging up, I walked to my closet to select my outfit for the evening. The spacious walk-in contained everything from casual wear to designer gowns for industry galas. For tonight, I deliberately chose quality but simple clothes, my favorite dark jeans, a white silk blouse, and a tailored blazer. No logos, no flash, just clean, classic style. My only jewelry would be small pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. As I laid the outfit on my bed, my work phone rang. It was Richard Thompson, one of our major investors and a respected figure in the tech world. He was also, coincidentally, the investor my father had been desperately trying to court for the past year. "Miranda, sorry to bother you on a Saturday," Richard began. "No problem. What's up?" "I just remembered your father's Lawrence Hayes, correct? Of Hayes Manufacturing." "Yes," I confirmed, wondering where this was going. "Well, I'm attending a birthday party for a Lawrence Hayes tonight. Country club on the east side. That wouldn't be your father, would it?" I couldn't help but laugh at the coincidence. One and the same. "Well, that's convenient," Richard said. "I've been meaning to discuss the integration timeline for Hayes Manufacturing. Perhaps we could chat briefly at the party? Kill two birds with one stone." This complicated matters. Richard knew me as the CEO of NeuroSync, not as the underachieving daughter my family believed me to be. If he approached me at the party using my professional title, the revelation would happen whether I was ready or not. "Richard, there's something you should know," I began, then explained the situation with my family. There was a long pause before he responded. "Let me get this straight. Your family has no idea you run one of the most innovative tech companies in the country? And they think you're, what? Struggling." "Basically," I confirmed. Richard's laugh boomed through the phone. "That's either the most humble or the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever heard. I'm not sure which." "Maybe a bit of both," I admitted. "Well, I'll play along if I see you there," he promised. "But Miranda, for what it's worth, you shouldn't have to hide your success from anyone, especially family." After ending the call, I sat at my kitchen island, laptop open to review the quarterly projections for my father's company. The business he'd built from nothing was now struggling under the weight of his increasingly outdated management style and focus on appearances over substance. The reports confirmed what I already knew. Without our intervention, Hayes Manufacturing would have faced bankruptcy within the year. Was I helping him out of familial duty, business opportunity, or was it something else entirely? Perhaps a part of me wanted him to know that his underachieving daughter had built something substantial enough to save his life's work. The thought made me uncomfortable. I prided myself on making business decisions based on merit, not emotion. As evening approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. I tried focusing on work, but my thoughts kept returning to the impending confrontation. Finally, I closed my laptop, got dressed, and headed to my practical but reliable Audi. No driver tonight, though I occasionally used the company car service for business events. The drive to Lakeview Country Club took 40 minutes, giving me ample time to rehearse various scenarios in my head. Part of me hoped my family would finally see past appearances. The rational part knew they probably wouldn't. The country club came into view, its manicured grounds illuminated with thousands of twinkling lights. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, Bentleys, Porsches, the occasional Ferrari. Valets in crisp uniforms scurried to accommodate the arriving guests, many of whom were dressed as if attending a Hollywood gala rather than a birthday party. I pulled up in my Audi, noting the barely concealed surprise on the young valet's face when I handed him my keys after watching him park the Maserati. Already the judgment was beginning, and I hadn't even entered the building. The entrance to the country club was adorned with floral arrangements that probably cost more than a month's rent for most people. Crystal champagne fountains flanked the doorway, and ice sculptures in the shape of my father's company logo glistened under strategic lighting. Subtle it was not. For a brief moment, insecurity washed over me. Was I making a mistake? Would it be so terrible to have worn an expensive dress just to keep the peace? Then I remembered all the Sunday dinners, all the snide comments, all the judgment. No, it was time for authenticity, whatever the consequences. Squaring my shoulders, I walked toward the entrance. The closer I got to the entrance, the more obvious the judgmental glances became. Two women in designer gowns whispered behind manicured hands as I passed. A business associate of my father's did a double take, his expression transforming from recognition to confusion to thinly veiled disdain as he took in my outfit. I kept walking, refusing to be intimidated. The marble foyer of the country club opened before me, with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandelier. Through the open double doors, I could see the main ballroom buzzing with expensively dressed guests, the women dripping in jewels, the men in bespoke suits. And then I spotted my sister Heather stationed near the entrance, like a sentinel. She wore a red designer gown that probably cost more than a decent used car, her dark hair styled in an elaborate updo, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. The moment her eyes landed on me, her perfectly made-up face contorted in horror. Before I could even reach the doorway, she rushed forward, physically positioning herself to block my path. "What are you wearing?" she hissed, her voice low but intense. "Are you serious right now, Miranda?" I glanced down at my outfit, then back at her. "Hello to you too, Heather. Don't play cute. This is Dad's big night. Everyone who matters in his industry is here." Her eyes darted nervously over my blazer and jeans. "You can't come in like that." "Like what? Clean, presentable, and on time?" I kept my voice calm. "No cheap clothes at Dad's party," she declared, crossing her arms. "You know the dress code was formal. This is deliberate provocation." Several nearby guests were now watching our exchange with poorly disguised interest. I could feel my cheeks warming but refused to show embarrassment. "My clothes aren't cheap, Heather. They're simple. There's a difference." "Simple?" She practically spat the word. "This is the most important night of Dad's year. He's trying to impress investors. How does it look when his own daughter shows up like she's going to a coffee shop?" "Maybe it shows that some people value substance over surface," I replied evenly. "Success isn't about what you wear." Heather let out a bitter laugh. "Success? What would you know about success? The rest of us are actually building something with our lives while you're still dressing like a college student. It's embarrassing." That stung, even though I knew the truth. Judging people by their appearance is what's truly embarrassing, Heather. Save the life lessons. She glanced over her shoulder, then waved frantically. Dad, we have a situation." My father appeared moments later, resplendent in a tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled. For a moment, seeing him approach with a smile, I felt a flicker of hope that he might defend me. That hope was extinguished the instant his eyes registered my outfit. "Miranda," he said, his voice dropping with disappointment. "What is this?" "Happy birthday, Dad," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "You look well. Don't change the subject." He gestured toward my clothes. "Everyone is dressed appropriately except you. Is this some kind of statement?" "It's not a statement. It's just clothes." "It's disrespectful," he countered, his voice hardening. "You knew this was important to me. Important to the family." "I didn't realize family acceptance had a dress code," I said quietly. His face reddened slightly. "This isn't just a family gathering. It's a networking event. I have potential investors here, business associates. And they'll judge your entire company by what your daughter wears?" I challenged. "First impressions matter in business. You'd know that if you'd ever built anything substantial." The casual cruelty of his remark hung in the air between us. Several more guests had paused to observe our confrontation. From the corner of my eye, I could see my mother approaching, concern etched on her perfectly maintained face. "Lawrence, what's happening?" she asked, then noticed me. "Oh, Miranda, you're here." The pause before "here" spoke volumes. "She showed up like this," Heather explained, gesturing to my outfit as if I were wearing rags instead of perfectly presentable clothes. My mother's expression fell.
"Oh dear."
"Miranda, sweetheart, I'm sure we can find you something to wear. Perhaps one of the staff has a spare uniform dress?" The suggestion that a server's uniform would be preferable to my current outfit was the final straw. "I'm not changing," I stated firmly. "Either I'm welcome as I am, or I'm not welcome at all." My father's jaw tightened as he glanced around at the onlookers. I could see him calculating the social cost of this scene versus the cost of allowing me to enter, as I was. Business won out over compassion. "I think it would be best if you came back when you're dressed appropriately," he said stiffly. "This is an important night for me." "Lawrence," my mother began, but he silenced her with a look. "It's my birthday, my event, my rules," he insisted. "Miranda knows what's expected in this family." I stood there, absorbing the full impact of his rejection. Despite preparing myself for this possibility, the pain was still acute. My own father was turning me away from his birthday party because my clothes weren't expensive enough. "I see," I said finally. "Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you get everything you deserve tonight." I turned to leave, feeling the weight of stares on my back. My father called after me, perhaps regretting his harshness, but Heather was already ushering him back inside, whispering reassurances that they were doing the right thing. Rather than leaving entirely, I decided to wait in the garden terrace adjacent to the main building. Part of me wanted to get in my car and drive away, never to return. But another part, the stronger part, knew that running away would solve nothing. I hadn't built a successful company by avoiding difficult situations. Finding a quiet bench partially concealed by ornamental shrubs, I sat down and pulled out my phone. Work would be my refuge, as it so often was. Several emails required my attention, including updates on the Hayes manufacturing integration plans. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sitting outside my father's party handling the details of his company's salvation. As I responded to messages, I fought to control the emotions churning inside me. Anger at my family's shallowness, hurt at being rejected so publicly, even a shameful pinch of anticipation about their eventual discovery of my success. Would validation from them even mean anything now? Should it? For years, I'd told myself I was keeping my success private to avoid their materialism. But sitting alone in that garden, I had to confront a harder truth. Part of me had been waiting for them to value me without the trappings of success, to love me for who I was, not what I had. Tonight had definitively answered that question. The garden terrace offered a strange sense of peace after the confrontation. Soft landscape lighting, illuminated flowering shrubs, and a small ornamental pond. From here, I could hear the muted sounds of the party, clinking glasses, orchestral music, polite laughter. The world I had been deemed unworthy to enter. I focused on my phone, responding to several urgent emails from the development team about our latest neural interface prototype. Technology problems were refreshingly straightforward compared to family dynamics. Code either worked or it didn't. There were no hidden agendas, no shifting expectations. A text from Stephanie lit up my screen. "How's it going? Do I need to organize a rescue mission?" I smiled despite myself and typed back, "Officially banned from the party for looking too poor. Currently hiding in the garden like some modern Cinderella, minus the fairy godmother." Her response came immediately. "Their loss. Want me to send a helicopter to pick you up?" "We could make quite an entrance." "Tempting," I replied, "but I think I'll wait a bit longer. Something tells me this night isn't over yet." As if on cue, I heard the crunch of shoes on the garden path. Looking up, I was surprised to see Richard Thompson approaching. In his early 60s, Richard had the confident bearing of someone comfortable in his own skin. Unlike many of the ostentatiously dressed guests, he wore a simple but impeccably tailored dark suit with a blue tie. No flashy accessories, no obvious displays of wealth, though I knew his net worth exceeded $1 billion. His expression registered surprise when he spotted me. "Ms. Hayes, what are you doing out here?" I stood to greet him. "Richard, I didn't expect to see you so soon." He closed the distance between us, then to my shock, gave a small, respectful bow. "Madam Chairman, I didn't know this was your father's celebration." The formality of his address, using my official title as the head of NeuroSync's board, was a stark contrast to how my family had just treated me. "Please, it's just Miranda tonight," I said, gesturing for him to join me on the bench. "Why are you sitting out here alone?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "The party's inside." I gave him a brief, unvarnished account of what had transpired at the entrance. His expression grew increasingly incredulous as I spoke. "Let me understand this correctly," he said when I finished. "Your father and sister refused to let you attend his birthday party because of your clothes? The same father whose company you recently saved from bankruptcy." "He doesn't know about that yet," I reminded him. "The acquisition hasn't been publicly announced." Richard shook his head in disbelief. "Even so, the chairman of Neurosync, one of the most innovative tech companies in the country, banned from a party for not looking wealthy enough. It's absurd." His indignation on my behalf was oddly comforting. "Welcome to my family dynamic," I said with a wry smile. "You know, I've been trying to get a meeting with your father for months," Richard remarked. "Hayes Manufacturing has potential, but his management approach is outdated. I was considering investing before I learned Neurosync had acquired them." "He's been quite eager to meet you," I confirmed. "Your name comes up at nearly every family dinner." Richard's eyebrows rose. "Does it now?" And yet, he has no idea his daughter is not only my business associate, but effectively my boss in several investment ventures. "Life is full of ironies," I said. He studied me for a moment. "You could have told them at any time. Used your position to force their respect. Why didn't you?" The question made me pause. I guess I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I've achieved or what I own. Naive, perhaps. "Not naive," Richard countered. "Principled. It's the same quality that makes you an exceptional CEO. You value substance over appearance, long-term vision over quick impressions." He stood suddenly, straightening his jacket. "Well, I didn't dress up and drive all the way out here not to attend this party. And I certainly don't do business with people who would treat my most valued business associate this way." "Richard, you don't have to." "I absolutely do," he interrupted firmly. "Besides, I think it's time for a small lesson in looking beyond appearances, don't you?" I hesitated, torn between the desire to avoid further confrontation and the recognition that this situation would never improve without addressing it directly. "You know," Richard said more gently, "early in my career, I was thrown out of a potential investor's office because I arrived on public transit instead of in a fancy car. The receptionist assumed I was a delivery person." He straightened his tie. 2 years later, I bought that company." That made me smile. "What did you do with the receptionist?" "Promoted her, actually. She had excellent organizational skills once she stopped judging people by their transportation choices." He offered his arm in an old-fashioned gesture. "Shall we?" Drawing a deep breath, I nodded and stood. "Let's go face the music." Together, we walked back toward the entrance, my thoughts swirling with anxiety and determination in equal measure. Whatever happened next would permanently alter my relationship with my family. For better or worse, the truth was about to come out. As we approached the entrance, I could see Heather still stationed there like a glamorous bouncer, now chatting with a group of my father's business associates. Her laughter cut off abruptly when she spotted me returning with Richard Thompson. Even from a distance, I could see the dramatic transformation in her expression. Shock, recognition, calculation. "Isn't that?" one of the businessmen with her murmured, staring at Richard. Heather's eyes darted between us, clearly trying to make sense of why I would be escorted by one of the most influential investors in the tech industry. By the time we reached the doors, she had plastered on her most dazzling social smile. "Mr. Thompson, what an unexpected honor," she gushed, completely ignoring our previous confrontation. "We're so delighted you could attend tonight." Richard's response was coolly polite. "Thank you. I was just having a fascinating conversation with your sister in the garden." "My sister?" Heather repeated, as if suddenly uncertain of our relationship. "Yes, Ms. Hayes and I have several business interests in common," Richard continued, his tone conversational, but his eyes sharp. I was quite surprised to find her outside rather than enjoying the festivities. Heather's smile faltered. "There was a small misunderstanding earlier about the dress code." "Was there?" Richard replied, his voice deceptively mild. "I find Ms. Hayes always dresses appropriately for success." "After you, Madam Chairman," he added, gesturing for me to precede him into the ballroom. The formal title hung in the air between us. I could almost see the gears turning in Heather's head as she processed the implications of Richard's words and deferential attitude toward me. Madam. Chairman, she repeated weakly. Without waiting for further discussion, Richard and I walked past her into the main ballroom. The space was opulently decorated with crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and elaborate floral arrangements. At the far end, my father stood on a small stage, microphone in hand, apparently in the middle of a welcome speech. And I want to thank each of you for contributing to the success of Hayes Manufacturing over these many years, he was saying. We face some challenges ahead, but with friends and associates like you. His voice trailed off as he spotted me entering with Richard. Even from across the room, I could see the confusion on his face. Several guests turned to follow his gaze, creating a ripple effect of awareness through the crowd. The room didn't fall silent exactly, but the volume of conversation noticeably decreased. Richard guided me forward, nodding politely to acquaintances as we made our way through the crowd. Every step closer to my father felt momentous, as if I were crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. When we reached the stage, my father had descended to floor level, his expression a mixture of confusion, annoyance, and curiosity. Miranda, I thought we discussed, he began, then noticed Richard beside me. Mr. Thompson, this is an unexpected pleasure. I see you've met my daughter. Richard smiled. Lawrence, I didn't know the CEO of NeuroSync was your daughter. You've been holding out on me. The silence that fell over the nearby guests was absolute. My father stared at Richard, then at me, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding, he said with an uncomfortable laugh. My daughter works in computers, yes, but she's not the chief executive officer and board chairman of NeuroSync Technologies, currently valued at over $2 billion. Richard supplied helpfully. I assure you, she most certainly is. I should know, as I'm one of the company's major investors. The murmurs that rippled through the crowd confirmed that most guests recognized the company name. NeuroSync had been featured in major business publications and tech journals consistently over the past few years. My father's face had gone pale. Miranda, is this true? Finding my voice, I nodded. Yes, Dad. I founded NeuroSync 8 years ago. We've grown considerably since then. But you never said anything, he protested, his voice rising slightly. All these years, at family dinners, you let us think that I was struggling, that I was unsuccessful. I finished for him. Yes, I did. I wanted to see if you could value me for who I am, not what I own or what I've achieved. By now, a significant crowd had gathered around us, including my mother and sister, who had pushed her way through to the front. There's something else you should know, Richard added, clearly enjoying his role in this drama. NeuroSync recently acquired a manufacturing company that was facing financial difficulties. A company with excellent potential but outdated management. My father's expression shifted as understanding dawned. Hayes Manufacturing, he whispered. You bought my company. We acquired it at a fair market price through a shell corporation, I confirmed. The paperwork will be made public next week. It was a sound business decision. Your company has good bones but needed new direction. The irony of the situation seemed to hit everyone simultaneously. The daughter, who had been judged inadequate based on her simple clothing, had not only built a billion-dollar company, but had also saved her father's business from collapse. Perhaps, Richard suggested to the silent crowd, this is a lesson in looking beyond appearances. I've worked with Miranda for years, and I can tell you that her brilliance lies partly in understanding that true quality doesn't need to announce itself with flash and expense. My father seemed to be struggling to process this information, his face cycling through multiple emotions. Pride battled with embarrassment, revelation with shame. My mother stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth. Miranda, darling, why didn't you tell us? Would it have made a difference, Mom? I asked gently. Would you have stopped suggesting I needed a makeover? Would Dad have stopped apologizing for my car? Would Heather have stopped making snide comments about my clothes? No one answered, the silence damning. Success isn't about what you wear or what you drive, I continued, addressing not just my family, but the entire listening crowd. It's about creating value, solving problems, treating people with respect regardless of their appearance or status. My father cleared his throat. Miranda, Your daughter's leadership saved your company from bankruptcy, Lawrence, Richard interrupted. 3 different banks had denied your loan applications. Without NeuroSync's intervention, you would have had to close your doors within 3 months. This revelation caused another stir among the guests. My father's business associates exchanged glances, some concerned, others clearly reevaluating their perception of both him and me. I had no idea, my father said quietly. Heather pushed forward. But Miranda, if you've been so successful all this time, why live like you do? Why drive a regular car? Why dress so normally? The question revealed how deeply she still didn't understand. Because those things don't matter to me, Heather. I don't need to prove my worth through possessions. My mother had tears in her eyes. All this time, we thought you were struggling. No, I corrected her gently. You assumed I was struggling because I didn't meet your definition of success. You never actually asked me about my work or my life. You were too busy critiquing it. The orchestra, sensing the tension, began playing again softly. Gradually, guests began to drift away from our family confrontation, giving us space while undoubtedly continuing to discuss what they'd witnessed. My father stood straighter, visibly trying to regain his composure. Well, this is unexpected. But I'm proud of you, Miranda. Very proud. The words seemed genuine, if belated. Thank you, I replied. But I'm still the same person I was an hour ago, wearing the same clothes you found so embarrassing. That's something to think about. Before he could respond, several business associates approached, suddenly eager to speak with me now that my status had been revealed. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Business associates who had previously ignored me now sought me out, eager to establish connections with the CEO of NeuroSync. Their transparent shift in behavior was both amusing and disheartening. My father moved through the crowd with a strange new demeanor, somewhere between proud and disoriented. I would catch him looking at me from across the room with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it admiration? Confusion? Perhaps a bit of both. Heather had transformed most dramatically of all. Gone was the condescending sister who had blocked my entrance. In her place was someone almost sycophantic, hovering nearby, offering to introduce me to people I already knew through business channels, laughing too loudly at my mildest observations. Miranda, you simply must meet the Andersons, she insisted, tugging at my arm. They're in biotech, which is practically the same as what you do, right? Neural interface technology is quite different, I corrected her gently. But I actually know Jordan Anderson already. We served on a technology ethics panel together last year. Oh. Of course you did, Heather said, her smile faltering momentarily before brightening again with renewed determination. What about the Wilsons? They have a vacation home in Aspen that would be perfect for corporate retreats. Heather, I said, stopping her. You don't need to do this. I'm still just your sister. Her perfect facade cracked slightly. But you're not, are you? You're important now. I was always important, I replied quietly. We all are. That's the point you've been missing. After extracting myself from Heather's networking attempts, I found myself cornered by my father in a small side room off the main ballroom. He'd closed the door halfway, creating a semblance of privacy. We need to talk, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Yes, we do, I agreed. He paced a few steps, struggling to find words. Why didn't you tell me? All these years, letting us think you were. He trailed off. Unsuccessful. I supplied. Because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I've accomplished or acquired. But family is supposed to support each other, share successes. Family is supposed to love each other unconditionally, I countered. Not mock each other's clothes or cars or lifestyle choices. He had the grace to look embarrassed. We weren't mocking you. We were concerned. We just wanted you to present yourself better.
Why?
So you wouldn't be embarrassed by me? So I would fit your image of success. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. Isn't it? Tonight you literally banned me from your party because of how I looked. Not because I was disruptive or rude, but because my perfectly clean, appropriate clothes weren't expensive enough for your image. He had no response to that. Richard Thompson chose that moment to join us, perhaps sensing the tension. Lawrence, I hope I'm not interrupting, but I want to discuss the transition plan for Hayes Manufacturing now that I've met both of you. My father straightened, shifting automatically into business mode. Of course, Mr. Thompson. Please call me Richard.
He turned to me.
Miranda, I assume you'll want to implement the integration strategy we discussed last week. Yes, with some adjustments based on what I've observed tonight, I replied professionally. My father looked between us, the reality of his new position finally sinking in. So you're really my boss now? The words seemed to physically pain him. For a man who had built his identity around being in charge, this reversal of fortune was clearly difficult to process. NeuroSync is the parent company of Hayes Manufacturing, I confirmed. But we believe in collaborative leadership. Your experience will be valuable during the transition. It was the diplomatic answer, the CEO answer. The daughter in me wanted to say more, to address the years of dismissal and judgment, but this wasn't the time or place. I see, my father said stiffly. Well, I suppose I should thank you for saving my company. It was a sound business decision, I replied, echoing my earlier statement. Your company has good fundamentals. Richard cleared his throat. Lawrence, I've been following your work for years. You built something substantial from nothing. That's commendable. The acquisition isn't a failure on your part, it's an evolution. My father seemed to take some comfort in this perspective. I appreciate that, Richard.
He turned to me.
And I owe you an apology, Miranda. About earlier, at the entrance. I was wrong. The admission clearly cost him. My father rarely apologized for anything. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. When we returned to the main ballroom, the dynamic had shifted palpably. Guests who had witnessed the earlier revelation were watching our family with undisguised interest. My mother immediately approached, her expression anxious. Is everything all right? She asked, looking between my father and me. We're working on it, I replied honestly. She took my hands in hers. Miranda, I'm so sorry. All these years, the things I said about your appearance, your career, I thought I was helping. By trying to make me more like Heather? I asked gently. My mother winced. I suppose that's exactly what I was doing. I was wrong. Her candor surprised me. Of all my family members, I had least expected my mother to acknowledge her role in the dynamic so readily. It's going to take time, I told her, for all of us to adjust. For the remainder of the evening, I navigated between professional networking and family reconciliation. Several times, I noticed my father responding to questions about me with an awkward mix of newfound pride and lingering shock. My daughter, the CEO, he would say, the phrase still sounding foreign on his tongue. Heather continued her campaign of excessive supportiveness, though as the night progressed, I could see cracks in her facade. At one point, I found her alone on the terrace, a champagne flute dangling from her fingers. All this time, she said when I approached, I thought I was the successful one. Success isn't a competition, Heather. She laughed bitterly. In this family, everything's a competition. There was truth in that I couldn't deny. You know what the worst part is? She continued. I've spent my whole adult life trying to impress people with things. The right clothes, the right car, the right address. And you didn't bother with any of that, and you're the one they're all impressed by. They're impressed by what I've built, not by me personally, I pointed out. Still. She sipped her champagne. It's going to take some getting used to. My little sister, the billionaire tech genius. I'm still just Miranda, I insisted. That hasn't changed. She gave me a sideways look. Everything has changed, and you know it. As the party wound down, I found myself experiencing a complex mixture of emotions. There was vindication, Yes, but also sadness that it had taken this dramatic revelation to earn my family's respect. Had anything really changed in their values, or had I simply proven myself according to their materialistic measuring stick after all? I was contemplating this question when Richard approached to say goodnight. "Quite an evening," he observed with understated humor. "That's one way to put it," I agreed. "For what it's worth," he said, "you handled it with grace. Not everyone would have been so measured after being treated that way." "Thank you for your part in it," I replied. "Though I suspect you enjoyed the drama more than you're letting on." He smiled. "Perhaps a bit. I've always appreciated a good object lesson in not judging books by their covers." He glanced at my father across the room. "He'll come around. Might take his pride a while to recover, but he will." "I hope so," I said, realizing I genuinely meant it. As I prepared to leave, my father approached one last time. "You're not staying for the full evening?" "I have an early meeting tomorrow," I explained. "Some of us work Sundays." He nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Will you still come to family dinner tomorrow night?" The question surprised me. "Do you still want me to?" "Of course," he said, sounding genuinely confused that I would ask. "Your family, even in these clothes?" I couldn't resist asking. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Especially in those clothes. I have a lot to learn from you, it seems." It wasn't a complete transformation. I didn't expect decades of materialistic values to dissolve in a single evening. But it was a start, a crack in the facade that might eventually lead to something more authentic. "I'll be there," I promised. "Same time as always." 3 months after my father's birthday party, I stood at the window of my office at NeuroSync headquarters, watching the Seattle skyline glitter in the afternoon sun. So much had changed in such a relatively short time, yet some days it felt like the revelation had happened in another lifetime. The full acquisition of Hayes Manufacturing had been completed, with my father now reporting to a board that I chaired. The transition hadn't been without challenges. For a man accustomed to complete autonomy, adjusting to corporate oversight was difficult. There had been arguments, tense meetings, and on one memorable occasion, my father storming out of a strategy session declaring he would never get used to taking orders from his own daughter. Yet gradually, he had begun to see the benefits of our more innovative approach. Hayes Manufacturing was already showing increased productivity and profit margins. More importantly, he was beginning to recognize the value of substance over appearance in business, as well as in personal relationships. Our weekly family dinners had resumed after a brief hiatus. The first few had been awkward affairs, with conversations stalling around the elephant in the room. My mother had tried too hard to express interest in my work, asking technical questions she didn't understand. Heather had swung between obvious jealousy and forced admiration. My father had seemed lost, unsure how to relate to me as both daughter and boss. But week by week, meal by meal, a new dynamic had begun to emerge. Not perfect, not without friction, but more honest than before. A knock at my office door interrupted my reflections. My assistant poked her head in. "Your 4 o'clock is here. It's your father." "Thank you, Rachel."
Send him in.
My father entered, looking both familiar and changed. He still wore an expensive suit, but there was a subtly different energy about him, less rigid, perhaps. "Miranda," he greeted me, no longer uncomfortable using my name in a professional context. "Am I interrupting?" "Not at all. Have a seat." He settled into the chair across from my desk, glancing around the office he'd visited several times now, but still seemed to find impressive. "The Jenkins contract came through. Thought you'd want to know right away." "That's excellent news," I replied, genuinely pleased. The Jenkins account had been his project, one I'd supported despite some board skepticism. "Congratulations. Your faith in the project made it possible," he acknowledged, a concession that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. We discussed business for a while, the easy back and forth of professionals who respected each other's expertise. It was perhaps the most comfortable dynamic we'd established so far. As our meeting concluded, he hesitated, then said, "Your mother wants me to remind you about dinner tonight. Apparently Heather has news." "I'll be there," I promised. He nodded, then added with a hint of his old gruffness, "And don't work too late. Success isn't just about business." The irony of him offering this advice wasn't lost on either of us. I smiled. "I learned that lesson a long time ago, Dad." After he left, I reflected on how our family had evolved. There had been a particularly significant moment about a month after the party. We were at a restaurant when a business associate stopped by our table and made a comment about my casual attire. To my shock, my father had immediately defended me. "My daughter dresses for comfort and practicality. When you're as successful as she is, you don't need to prove anything with your clothes." The moment had been small but meaningful, a tangible sign that perhaps he was truly beginning to understand. Heather's transformation had been more complicated. Initially, she had swung to the opposite extreme, showing up to family dinner in jeans and a plain sweater, an obvious overcorrection that looked as unnatural on her as a ball gown would have on me. "You don't need to change who you are," I had told her privately. "There's nothing wrong with enjoying fashion and beauty if that's authentic to you. The problem was judging others by those standards." She had seemed genuinely surprised by this perspective. "But I thought you hated all that stuff." "It's not for me," I had clarified. "But that doesn't make it wrong. The issue was never your designer dresses, Heather. It was your designer judgment." Slowly, she had found a middle ground, still stylish but less obsessed with labels and status symbols. More surprisingly, she had begun asking thoughtful questions about my work and career path. Last week, she'd even requested my advice about a small business idea she was considering, a boutique focused on sustainable fashion. My mother, perhaps the most adaptable of the family, had undergone her own evolution. She had admitted during a private lunch that she had always been insecure about the family's sudden wealth. "I never quite felt I belonged in that world," she confessed. "Following all those unwritten rules about what to wear and how to act felt like the only way to avoid being exposed as an imposter." "I understand that feeling better than you might think," I had told her. "In tech, I'm often the only woman in a room full of men who assume I don't belong there." That conversation had been a turning point for us, a recognition of shared vulnerability beneath our very different external presentations. My phone buzzed, bringing me back to the present. It was a text from Stephanie. "Dinner at your parents' tonight? Want me to be on standby with an emergency work crisis in case you need an escape?" I smiled and typed back, "Thanks, but I think we're making progress. Though keep that offer open for the holidays." As I gathered my things to leave for the day, I reflected on the lessons of the past few months. My family was far from perfect. The materialistic values ingrained over decades wouldn't disappear overnight. But there was now at least an awareness, an opening for something more authentic. The night of my father's party had been painful, but necessary. It had shattered the illusion that I needed external validation to be worthy, while paradoxically creating space for my family to begin seeing me as I truly was. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house in my usual jeans and simple top. My father opened the door, smiled, and welcomed me with a genuine hug. "Everyone's in the living room," he said. "Heather's boyfriend just proposed." That was her big news. "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for my sister. As we walked toward the living room, he added quietly, "You know, I'm proud of you, Miranda. Not because of your company or your success, but because of who you are. Your integrity. It took me too long to see that." The words weren't perfect, and our relationship would never be without complications. But in that moment, I felt something I had been seeking for years, acceptance for who I truly was, not what I owned or had achieved. True worth, I had learned, never comes from external validation or material possessions. It comes from living authentically, from creating value in the world, and from having the courage to be yourself even when others judge you for it. As I joined my family in the living room, I knew that regardless of what clothes I wore or car I drove, I was finally being seen for who I really was. And that was worth more than any designer label could ever be. So, what about you? Have you ever been judged based on appearances rather than your true worth? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to know how you handled it. And if you found something valuable in my story, Please hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life experiences. Remember, your worth isn't determined by what you wear or own, but by who you are at heart. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.